Wage is essential. So, the introduction to this topic is how minimum wage affects the economy, the effects it has on people of all incomes, and the positive and negative effects of low wage workers. And I'll get into all these different topics during this presentation. And here's a little graph showing um, what the current minimum wage is in the US. And I wanted to show you this just to display, how many states do actually use the federal minimum wage and how many have increased it to try and compensate for the living wage in their different states. So this is the first data I'm going to show you, and I'm showing you this because minimum wage was increased in 2007 and the results were relayed into 2008. And we can see a big increase in unemployment during this time because businesses had to cut their wages or cut employees because they were required to raise their wages at the time. And along with that, an economic recession was occurring, so many people were being fired from their jobs, and this spiked the unemployment rate greatly. And then we can see as minimum wage effects were kind of starting to balance out. We see another downward trend in unemployment, and this is because the minimum wage was consistent and the economy was able to heal from this recession. And then we can also see the inflation rate was pretty constant up until 2008 when those effects hit from the raise in minimum wage and the economic recession. And it's incredible what a little change in minimum wage will cause to an economy. As we can see, there's a pretty big hike and then a drop and then another hike up again. But as you can see in this graph, it remains fairly constant up through 2012 to 2019 because there's no big economic changes or big changes in minimum wage. So it made the economy more stable. And like I said before, the unemployment along with this lowered. My cogent argument is if minimum wage is raised, then the economy is going to have a downward trend. And this argument follows modus ponens, if A, then B, therefore B. And data shows that in 2007 into 2008, when the minimum wage was raised, that there was a significant increase in inflation and there was also an economic recession. And this validates my argument because it does in fact prove that if minimum wage is raised, then the economy would have a downward trend as it did in 2007 through 2008. My counter argument is if minimum wage is raised, then many people will be freed of poverty. If many people are freed of poverty, then there will be significantly less child neglect in the home. So if minimum wage is raised, then there will be significantly less child neglect in the home. And this argument is in the form of hypothetical syllogism. And it is valid because with every dollar increase in minimum wage, there's a 9.6% decrease in child neglect. And here's some pros and cons of raising minimum wage. Some pros are many people could be freed of poverty, there's less child neglect, low wage workers would have a better mental state, and minimum wage could become closer to what the living wage is. And some cons of raising it are there's higher rates of inflation, economical downtrends, job loss among all working classes, low wage benefits lost for many who currently receive government aid, and decreases in the amount of employment for young people. And this job loss among all working classes comes into play because of the spike in inflation, and employers can no longer afford to pay as many employees, so that in turn causes job loss among all wage groups, not just people in lower wage jobs. And the low wage benefits comes into play with the poverty gap, because once people get out of the poverty gap, they lose a lot of government benefits, which is both good and bad because it helps the economy out because there's not as many people living off of government as many government funds, but it's also bad because some of these people don't know what to do once they get uh, out of these government programs, and some of them are less well off than before just because of these government programs that help them out so much. Some research I did was employment rate and median wage has dropped for men from 1973 to 2007 um, for a pretty wide age group, and this is because inflation, and we've had two minimum wage increases since this time, so there's not as much room for businesses to employ people, and businesses are getting more efficient and not requiring more as many people as previously. Getting people out of poverty is not a simple task, but minimum wage increases allow for many people to get out of poverty, which is not only beneficial to them but also the economy. And this is true because, like I said before, these government programs put a lot of money into people with that are in poverty, and once they get out of poverty, it does improve the economy just because they're no longer relying on tax dollars and things like that to support their needs, and the government can spend that money in other ways than on people who no longer need the help anymore because they're out of the poverty gap. And like I said before, minimum wage is lower in every state than the living wage, so many people who have minimum wage jobs have to work two jobs or struggle a lot to try and raise families. And these are my sources. And my conclusion is overall changes in minimum wage cause many effects, both positive and negative, but keeping minimum wage stable allows the economy to work properly and for forced changes not to cause damage. Although minimum wage raises do not benefit many people, it also harms many others by job loss and inflation, um, making it more expensive to live. An increase in minimum wage would not outweigh the benefits of keeping it constant. Therefore, minimum wage should remain the same. And I truly believe this, and I think keeping minimum wage the same allows a lot of people to receive government aid that they do need and that without would struggle. And I think that keeping it constant allows for the economy to be more successful and keep the unemployment low so that a lot of people are employed, and the less people on unemployment we have, the less the government has to support, and that in turn lowers our taxes and makes it easier for everybody to live. And these are some questions I have for you guys. Do you believe job loss of a small amount of people is worth improving the lives of many others? If you have a job, did you ever find it difficult to find employment? Do you know any adults that have to work multiple jobs because of low wages? And if you were in a position to raise or maintain minimum wage, what would this presentation and your opinions motivate you to do? Thank you.